We're going to start off our day being joined by Brad Keselowski, driver of the number 2 Alliance Truck Parts Ford for Team Penske. And really, Brad, when drivers come to Pocono, a lot of things to do outdoors. I don't think you had time to enjoy that this week. You had a little something going on.
No, we had a pretty long week or short week, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it, with testing in New York and, trying to get ready for everything else that's coming up. And so we're glad to be here. It's been a good track for us, trying to keep kind of the role that we've been on here going. I think we got a great shot at winning. Of course, we qualified up front here and on the pole in the first race. Which always puts a little bit of pressure on you coming back because it's kind of hard to top that. But we didn't win. I think we finished third, had a shot at it there late. And last fall in this race, we finished second. So, I think we've got a great shot in general of winning here again, and would like to get number 5 up on the board and just kind of ready to get to it.
Good. It's good to have you here. We're going to start off here with Woody, and then we'll go to Al, and we'll get wireless mics to you.
Woody came with MRN. Brad, other than the crash, I was curious about your impressions of the newly repaved Watkins Glen, and do you remember the last time you crashed on a road course test and then came here?
Yeah, I do remember. If I didn't remember it, I'm guessing they wouldn't let me sit here. My thoughts on the pavement is, I think we've seen a pretty dramatic shift in probably the last 4 or 5 years with respect to the type of pavement that's being used to repave the tracks. And we probably saw that again at Watkins Glen, where the pavement is very, very smooth, lasts a really long time. Unfortunately, it doesn't wear the tires, which is, a key component to the way the cars perform. And it's kind of an interesting relationship there. But the track itself has a lot of grip. It's very smooth and should put up some fast speeds. Of course, the struggle is to try to get the cars to where they can run in multiple grooves because of the limitations of the tire and the new surface. So the track itself is in beautiful condition to run, single file. But we got to continue to work on, aggregates and tires and all those things to open up the passing.
We're going to go next to Al, and then to Bob, and then to Kenny, and then to Jerry.
Yeah, Brad, Al Pierce from Auto Week. I've talked to a number of young drivers who are mired at the back of the pack every weekend. They worry that they're in a vicious cycle where they're not in equipment good enough to show their talent, so they don't have the talent to get good equipment. That never happened to you. You started pretty much with good stuff. What would you say?
At the cup level, sometimes, yeah.
Well, but you won with Finch, and then that got you where So anyway, my point is this: if a young kid came to you and said, "I'm in a cycle, I can't get out of this deal," what would you say? Any advice to kids who think they'll never get any further than 35th to 40th every weekend?
Well, I would say, first off, if you have that mindset, you're not going to. If you're defeated in your mind, you're not going to ever get there in reality. I think there was a good point in time in my career where I was not in quality rides or equipment. You're being watched whether you think you are or not, no matter how you run. And all you can do is outperform your equipment, and that's running smart races and building great relationships with your team and people that are in the sport, maybe even your manufacturer. And I would tell anyone in those situations that to make the most of your opportunity, and you'll keep getting opportunities. You will leapfrog in this sport, and not just in the sport, but in this life. And I'm a big believer in that. So, I don't believe in the cycle of being stuck in bad equipment. I believe in the cycle of, in this life, more times than not, you get what you deserve or where you're supposed to be. Of course, I've caught some breaks to be where I'm at right now, and I recognize that. But I think if you go out and make the most out of every opportunity you have in life, that things work out, and that's just been my guiding light.
Go to Bob, and then to the back to Kenny, then over to Jerry, then up front to Lee.
Bob Pockris, ESPN. In regards to the wreck at Watkins Glen, are you comfortable with the tire barrier that you hit versus whether there should be a safer barrier there? Also, had you guys done anything to the floorboard, footbox area, maybe since Road America or since the other recent crashes to help you? And also, finally, will you do any changes to as far as the brake package that you were using to avoid it in the future?
Yeah, well, I guess 3 parts there, so bear with me if I miss a part. Am I comfortable with the tire barriers? Yeah, I understand the whole tire barrier concept. In general, I'm not comfortable with tracks that have, runoffs that lead to very harsh angles, and that's certainly the situation that track has and always has had it. Road courses remain the most dangerous tracks in motorsports for good reason because of that. But we know that going in. Some place has to be the safest, some place has to be the most dangerous. It's funny because a lot of times we end up talking about Daytona and Talladega, and they don't ever worry me as much as road courses do. I can promise you that. But I guess from a tire barrier perspective, taking out the angles, tire barriers are safer barriers. It's kind of a wash to me on those types of tracks. Preferably, we just have angles to where when you hit, you can hit it with a safer barrier and not have to worry about things. But I understand there's some limitations there because a lot of these road courses run, different series and so forth, and they don't want to get into a situation where a minor spin damages, some rich guy's $300,000 car. So there's some trade-offs there, I understand. But that's just part of it. As far as the car, there's been a lot of changes in our car since 2011 with regards to safety, and I think we went through, at least with Team Penske, a complete safety overhaul from the pedals being redesigned to hopefully not break my feet, which I didn't, which was great. The floorboards redesigned with a completely new style of carbon fiber and I'm trying to think of the right term there, but composite materials. The seat, we helped a company design a new seat from that time, which I think there's a handful of teams in the garage that are running it that we feel is significantly safer. The steering wheel itself, Max Pappas designed a new steering wheel that's meant to absorb a lot of energy. So that was redesigned. I know the shifter was redesigned. I'm sure I'm missing some parts out there. I know there's some helmet redesign work, some seatbelt redesign work. So a lot of pieces were redesigned, and I think from what I can tell at this moment, all the pieces that we were able to redesign performed very well. The one piece we weren't able to redesign, which was the steering column, is probably the weakest link in those type of impacts at the moment. Of course, there's always going to be one weak link, but that one in particular, continues to be a pretty big issue. I think we've seen that a couple times here over the last few years where the steering wheel comes back up in your face and can do a lot of damage to your helmet, your head, etc. I got lucky that I didn't get too much of it, but in general, I would say I'm fairly pleased, but always looking for more.
Any brakes, any changes?
No, there was just an installation error with the brakes. So, yeah, the brake line wasn't installed in the proper way, and it broke.
Go next to Kenny, Jerry, Lee, and then back to Dustin.
Kenny Bruce with NASCAR.com. I won't ask 4 questions. I'll see what
It's okay.
No,
he just got them all out in one big chunk, so I kind of feel good about that.
He pretty much covered what I was going to ask. But talking about the structural changes that NASCAR announced, do you know if that will increase or how much weight that will add to the car and if it will change things like center of gravity? And also, would you make those changes for Talladega during the chase since that's optional?
Well, I can't speak, I guess, to your second part as far as will I make the changes. I don't work as much on the race cars as I used to, so I will definitely not be making any changes. But the team themselves, I don't think we have any plans to undergo those before Talladega. The timeline for building those cars is already come and passed with respect to that particular feature on the car. Even though the cars aren't complete, that feature on the car that is done through our chassis shop. I saw the cars yesterday, actually, so I know it's already done past that step, so it's kind of too late for us. I'm sure there'll be some others that do undertake those steps. I think it's probably the right direction with respect to those racetracks, although I would like to have seen it, probably done in a different way with respect to not adding as much weight to the car. It's kind of one of those dorky engineering formulas where, you add more mass to something to make it safer, but then when you hit something else, you hit it harder. So we're safer in a sense because the cars are bigger and, more steel. It's like a tank. But when two tanks run into each other, it's still two tanks running into each other. So you lose the efficiencies there. So I think overall it's probably a net gain, and I think there's probably a challenge that could be undertaken by the industry to find a better way to do it than just throwing steel at it. But that said, I'm still happy that we're thinking in the right direction.
Go next to Jerry, then to Lee, and then we'll finish up with Dustin.
Jerry Jordan, Performance Racing Network, kicking the tires. With 4 wins at this point in the season, how do you rate your? Obviously it's not bad, A, B, or C. And do you have the ability now, you and Paul, to take chances and kind of focus on the final 10, or do you just go for more wins, considering the Toyotas are so dominant?
I think having 4 wins at this point is certainly something we're ecstatic about. And if we're looking back and not forward, that's a good place to be in the year is to have 4 wins just past the midway point. Unfortunately, it doesn't count for much once we get to the chase, but it's something we can be proud of and look forward and say that we're off to a good start. As far as taking chances, I kind of feel like it's the exact opposite. I know you hear all the time about taking chances. Honestly, I feel like it's the exact opposite. I think as a driver that you do things a lot differently once you already have wins where you take less chances. I think the team itself takes more chances with parts and respect to failure and strategy. But it seems like, as a driver, it's like with having the reset in the chase, it reminds me of like an NBA game where, you reset at the end of the third quarter. And so all you do as a driver is try not to have any fouls so you try not to have everybody pissed off at you until you get to the last quarter. That's kind of my take on it. Because it doesn't really matter once you have a win, nothing else really matters. You could have 10 wins, it just doesn't get you anywhere. I think from that perspective, there's more chances probably from the team side, and as we've seen this chase evolve, there's probably less chance taking from the driver's side.
Lee Spencer, Motorsport.com. Can you talk a little bit about restarts? Jeff Gordon last week said he had his butt handed to him pretty much because, when you're kind of out of practice, and I would also guess at nearing 45 years old, your reaction time may be not as quick. And how much experience do you think Kyle Busch gained learning how to perfect restarts from spending as much time in the Truck Series as he did?
Talking about restarts, I would say that restarts have developed into a key part of our racing since we've gone to double file restarts. What happens is you always have one line that's preferred and one line that's not, and of course you have the whole restart zone situation, and what that's created is this offense/defense mode that everyone goes into depending on whether they're in the preferred or non-preferred lane. And it's just different tactics than, I think what we've traditionally seen in the sport. And those tactics have evolved over timely to where, the drivers that have a lot of experience are pretty darn good at it. So the more experience you can get at it in those other series is, very beneficial, especially as the leader. And I would say that, Kyle's kind of getting out of it what he puts in. He puts in a lot of work, and he's getting a lot of results out of it. And, he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Where would you rank yourself among, competitors on restarts?
Some days you feel really good. Some days not so much. I think right now that it's my opinion that probably Joey Logano's the best restarter in the sport right now, and Kyle's probably a pretty close second. I think I'm probably in that top 10 bracket, but not as high as I want to be. I want to be the best at it.
Finish up with Dustin.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. You talked about the things that have been learned since the big accident at Road Atlanta. Where do things need to go forward with this incident this time? Obviously, Denny had one that was somewhat similar to this a few years ago. This probably isn't the last time something like that's going to happen at that place or any place else. So you've talked about what's happened since. Where do things need to go now? What needs to be looked at? And one other thing, with the steering wheel, was that your head that hit, or was that more your chest that bent that up?
I think everything. To your second question, I think everything. With respect to what needs to change, it's a good question. One that I don't know I have all the answers to. The answers I do have is that, there's only so many of those hits you're going to take before someone gets killed. It's just the way it is. I know that. It's not something I'm comfortable with, but I think as a sport, there's, a lot of different ways to look at it. At the end of the day, I'm still standing here. Odds are that if, 100 people take that hit, 1 or 2 are not going to be standing here anymore. I think that's pretty safe to say. So since, half a dozen have taken pretty similar hits in that same part of the racetrack, I would say it begs to reason that maybe a change should be made in that area. But I can't say that I have the specific idea at this time, because more people are going to take that hit, and eventually one of us ain't going to come back. But that's something that the smart guys that work on that stuff are going to have to figure out sometime.
And you make a statement as strong as that. Why don't you just say, why don't the guys, and maybe it's not as simple as getting everybody together, say, look, we're not going to do this, or this needs to be changed before we come back, and maybe not everybody agrees with you, but when you make a statement that strong, why isn't there some action that's put forth with it?
Well, to some point, we've signed up for a certain level of risk, and that's right on the edge of what's acceptable risk. I think every driver has their own line, and if you're looking at it from that perspective, I think every driver is saying that that's the acceptable risk they've signed up for, and it falls within those parameters.
Well, Brad, we're glad to have you here today, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you.
Take care.